What's up, guys? So you saw the title. We are going to be taking apart the Super Nintendo Classic, and then I also grabbed the Nintendo Classic so we can kind of compare the two boards. Now I'm going to take this one apart first. I remember what this board looks like, then we'll take this one apart also, and we'll kind of compare and contrast the boards. Now, if you haven't seen the Super Nintendo Classic yet, it's pretty awesome. The reset and the power work fine. The one thing that's kind of weird to me, and I know they did it for, obviously, appearances and everything, the front here kind of pops off, and I'm not the biggest fan of it. It has like a flap that I guess just kind of floats there. So it kind of just floats around. It really has no actual purpose other than just for looks, but I guess it does kind of keep the look if you don't have anything plugged in and you just have it sitting up on a shelf. And the reason right away when I had a feeling it was going to be the same board, once I saw the back, I mean, come on, right? It looks exactly the same in terms of placement of the HDMI port and the power. The only difference, obviously, is the board is just oriented in a different way, different orientation. So if you kind of turn it this way, it looks a little more, a little similar there, right? So they probably just flipped the board around like we were hearing. So let's get this Super Nintendo Classic apart, and then we'll take a look at that one compared, and we'll look at the chips on here, although I'm pretty sure it's already an all-winner R16. So let me get this apart, and then we'll compare it. Super easy to get it apart, by the way. There's just 4 Phillips head screws under the felt or rubber stoppers. That's pretty much it. And then it comes apart. Now I did look, and of course it does have the button board at the top here like we would expect. You can see the cable just runs all the way around, and that of course would work on either one. I believe the Nintendo Classic has a similar setup. But let me go ahead, get this guy unclipped, and then we can go over to the board, which is covered by the same heatsink as the NES Classic. There you go. So this guy is actually an interesting little mechanism. Uses the spring there like you'd assume, so it pulls it taut as you move that up and down. And then if I remember correctly, this should be just attached to a switch on the other side. It is. You know, I'll pull this out too so we can just take a quick look at it. I've always told you guys to be very careful when springs are involved. Be very careful with this spring. If that gets away from you, it's not going to be fun. So here is the clip on the other side. The way that the reset button works, believe it or not, this actually just runs up and down, has essentially a piece of plastic here that then rubs against pretty much a curved button. So this will just set up and go and just basically float across that button that's set up to kind of have it ramp up. And then of course you have your switch here that just sits in there. So a pretty straightforward board. It's not fancy or anything, but it gets the job done. That's all you ask for. All right, so the board came out, only 5 screws holds the entire board down. Again, similar to NES Classic. And it just has this heatsink kind of on top of it that's held with the thermal pad on the following side there. So it's like a sticky pad kind of that just holds it. It's just used, you see the same thing on video cards, for example, on like the RAM modules, nothing major. So here's the board. I'll get you guys some close-up pictures of it as well. Yes, it's using the R16 chipset, which is, it works. It should have a Mali, I believe, 400. I'm going off the top of my head here. I know it does have 256 megabytes of DDR3 RAM, and then of course it has its flash chip that it stores all of the data on, 512 megabytes there. So let's get the NES board apart as well. I'm going to take that apart and we'll literally compare them side by side. So right away you can see a very similar setup here, right? That looks that way. So I guess let's pull this board out, although it's already looking exactly the same as we expected. Trying to see if there's much of any, did they do anything different? Because it looks like they did not. I'm actually gonna have to mark these boards because they are going to come out looking exactly the same. So I'm just gonna put an S on the Super Nintendo one. That way I don't get it, like I said, mixed up. Because we're about to take this guy apart and I can already tell it's the same board. But we will verify that in a minute. So there you go, guys. Exact same board and not different even a little bit from what I can see here. Let me see if they have any different markings on them. Okay, they at least changed up some of the text on the board. They have the FTM SHVC main 01, and then on the other, the NES board, it's the FTM NES main 01. So they at least changed up some of the text a little bit when they were producing them. I guess they knew which one was going to go where. But otherwise, let's see, we should have pretty much the same processor, R16. We do. I think everything's the same. Different flat, they're actually using different flash chip. One is a Spansion, the other one's an MX. Everything else is the same though. Literally everything. Even down to where you plug everything in. I'm glad I labeled this. So that means that the Super Nintendo board could easily fit and would absolutely plug in to the NES board. For example, if I sit this in here, and you'll pretty much see it seems to fit exactly the same. Look, there you go. It'll plug in, and I can pretty much run, yep, all the buttons fit the same. There's power reset. The heatsink will fit on there, and then it will basically be the Super Nintendo board in the NES shell. Everything would work as well. Power buttons, everything would run. So yeah, exact same board. It looks like what they just did was just flash different images to each chip. The 512 megabytes of storage for the operating system and whatnot. Same board though. I'm gonna go ahead and put these guys back together because there's not much else to see here. Now there is one thing I noticed that's a little different here. Right here, this is the NES board. There is a spot where you could put like another port, kind of like this one, for example, the power port, right along here. So this is not actually present on the Super Nintendo board, which tells me they did at least redo the circuit board to a degree. There is a good chance that these boards were kind of generic boards that were used for other things possibly at the time, and when they did the NES Classic, this is all that was available to them. And that might be why they really shut down production of it and then re-upped it as the Super Nintendo was coming back into the fold, because they were pretty much going to be redoing this board and more refined possibly, because this is missing completely, which is very interesting. Again, they just changed up the circuit board design slightly, but that does tell me that they were at least considering changing it for some reason, which could be mass production, just redesigning it. But kind of interesting nonetheless to note. Yeah, guys, thanks for watching though. Sorry there wasn't anything really cool going on inside, but once I heard it was the same board, I knew it was going to be a pretty quick video overall. Not a lot to talk about there, but obviously they're using the same board, and that's the big reason so many of these showed up in stores today, because, well, it's the same board they've been working with for over a year now with the NES Classic. So don't be surprised if you start seeing more and more of these show up. And as we've heard in 2018, more of these show up. Don't pay scalpers. Trust me, these boards are very common. Nintendo has this production down to a T, it sounds like, since the Target I went to got over 100 of these Super Nintendo Classics in. Walked in, picked it up, no problem. So definitely start checking your stores as we go forward if you missed out, because you will probably see these pop up. Very easy to produce. It's the same board we deal with. Thanks guys for watching. I'll see you next time.